Good evening to everyone entering our webinar. We're about to begin just getting everyone settled, and then Principal Yu will start us off tonight.
I think we can get started, right? So good evening, everyone. It's really nice to have all of you over Zoom. As you can see, I'm actually on a moving train. I just left the school building. So it seems part of the course that leaving late, how we are at Stuyvesant. But really wanted to make sure I said a few words. Welcome our friends from Robin, Linda, Scott, and Tara, who are going to be, again, leading this presentation. We partner with Robin to really support our young people and wanting to make sure that our young people know that we're here to provide support. Again, this has been a very challenging year, but there's been vast improvements. Clearly, the work that we're doing, the work that Robin is doing to support young people through this time, again, is our commitment to their social emotional health, them being productive young adults, and then being successful students. So far, we've been really impressed by all the work that they've done, including all the support from you as parents and family members. So again, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being here tonight. It's going to be a great presentation. I think you'll walk away with a lot of great strategies and insight on how we can best support our young people, both inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and at home. So again, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Prabhu for some introductions.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Mimi Prabhu. I'm an assistant principal at Stuyvesant. Just wanted to share, we've been working with Robin since the summer as we were transitioning from remote back into the school building. And they've already been at our school a number of times coaching with our students, talking about resiliency, the power of positive thinking and managing stress amongst a lot of other things. And they're going to continue this spring. So they're here tonight to kind of share what they've been doing with our students, but also to kind of let us know why it's so important that we support our students each and every day, because the social emotional foundation helps them excel academically as well. So our two speakers tonight are Scott and Tara. In 2018, Scott took his experiences supporting young people trying to reach their potential and pivoted to the field of mental health. And he founded the Mental Health Partnership and launched Robin in 2020. Tara is Robin's social emotional learning client services manager. She spent 14 years as an elementary school teacher and served on the SEL learning leadership team. And she's also a national board certified health and wellness coach. So please join me in welcoming both Scott and Tara.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Thank you so much, everyone that's here. Principal Singh, thank you so much for the introduction and the warm welcome that we've gotten from the moment that we began our relationship with Stuyvesant. I'll give you a little bit of my personal background, why I feel like some of the things that I have to share might relate to the experiences that you all are going through as parents, and can put myself back in the seat of the students that you all have just a couple more years than 25 years ago. Man, it's amazing how much time flies. But I was born in the Bronx. I grew up in and around New York City. And when I was in high school, 16 years old, my dad bought a minor league basketball team and I moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I will tell you that was the coolest thing that could happen to a 16-year-old boy. I got to move to a new town. I got to hang out with the players, the cheerleaders, give away tickets, go down to the court, give away t-shirts. Team went bankrupt in 6 months. It was not so cool anymore. That was probably the first moment in my life where, looking back, I can now begin to realize how important it was that I grew up with a set of social emotional skills that my parents had given me, that I had gotten from mentors in my life. But my entire life shifted in an instant. Now, when I was 16 years old and I was thinking about what I was going to do after high school, I always knew I was going to go to college. I think if your kids go to Stuyvesant, you're probably thinking the exact same thing. But there's no clear one path to follow to move from high school to college or from college to the rest of your life. There are going to be a lot of challenges. There are going to be a lot of triumphs. And how you approach each of these is going to help to determine the success or challenges that we face in life. I tell my students all the time that when I was in high school, I found field trips to be the most stimulating part of my high school experience. Now, I didn't major in field trips, but I was involved in a lot of activities. I was president of student government. I got elected to the school board when I was in high school. I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper. I was president of Model UN. I was involved in a lot of activities. And I'll tell you that because I was surrounded by so many folks, so many people that had different experiences, but were driven to succeed, I incorporated a lot of what I learned in my day-to-day. And when it came time to apply to college, it wasn't for me just about where I was going to get in, it was how I was going to pay for it. Thankfully, I got involved with a lot of amazing adults that mentored me through that relationship. And when I applied to school, I applied to Harvard because I thought that would be the most amazing place to go to school. And I got deferred when I applied early. Then I decided that Harvard was the stupidest place to go to school and no one should ever go there. I really wanted to go to Stanford. I got rejected. Stanford is a silly place. Nobody should go there. I applied to Princeton. I got rejected. You might know where I'm going with this. Princeton is also a silly place. But the thing was, my mom continued to push me. And she said, it doesn't matter how many no's you get, because when you keep knocking on doors, there's going to be a yes on the other side. And ultimately, I not only got accepted to Harvard regular decision, but I got a full scholarship. Now, I cleaned toilets all through college, and I was a doorman, not the most glamorous of jobs. But the skills that I developed not only in high school, but through those challenges of applying to college and then be surrounded by the most amazing people on the planet, that helped me become who I am today. My mom bought me a book for my 25th birthday and highlighted a quote. It was The Wit and Wisdom of Mark Twain. On the opening page, it said, I left home at 18, thinking my parents were the stupidest people I'd ever met. I returned home in 7 years, surprised at how much they learned. I'll tell you, now that I'm further along in life and I look back at all the advice that I got from parents and teachers, at the time, it may not have all sunk in, but it definitely planted the seeds that over time grew into the life that I now have. When I left college, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted a life of service. And again, as I look back at who I've become and where I've come from, so much of this has been because it wasn't just about the classroom. It wasn't just about my SAT scores. It wasn't just about my grades. It was about better formed brains, not just better filled brains. And that distinction is one that I took into my work. First company that I founded, A-List Education, was focused on college access. I started it in my car. It was hard. We had 5 students to begin with. When I stepped down as CEO in 2017, we served 100,000 young people every year, and more than 90% of our students didn't have to pay $1 to go to college. I think about my commitment to others as something that really is a piece of what it means to be connected to others. At Robin, everything that we do is rooted in connection. All of these achievements, all of these things that I feel like I've accomplished, I accomplished with a whole bunch of other people. I accomplished with a whole bunch of supports. In the intro, Mimi said that in 2018, I pivoted to mental health. I'll tell you why. Spending 13 years inside of schools, working with hundreds of thousands of students and thousands of teachers around the world, from Bangkok to Boston and from Beijing to, let's just pick some other random place. Let's put it in Haiti or in Venezuela or in Colombia. Didn't matter where I was. As I look around at all of those experiences, so much of where I saw the struggle wasn't necessarily in the classroom. It was how students were coming prepared to learn. How could they look at failure not as something to be scared of, but something to embrace? Because there are no failures, there are only lessons. What I was able to accomplish absolutely is rooted in what we call non-cognitive skills. It's not just about what you know, it's how you apply what you know. It's how your character comes through in those moments. And as I pivoted away from A-List Education and a focus on just getting to college, and I moved into mental health, so much of what my focus was is how do I help students see the world through those same eyes? I battled a whole bunch of tragedies. I buried a whole bunch of friends. I faced a whole bunch of challenging moments, but I always got up and I dusted myself off. And during the pandemic, when things were the most challenging, I founded 3 different companies, all that were worth more than $10 million by the end of 2021. I don't tell you that because I want to brag. I tell you that because so much of what we look at when we look at social emotional learning is something that we can't quite put our arms around. It's something that feels squishy. What does it mean to be connected to your community? What does it mean to have self-awareness? I share these statistics because when I look back at my life, I couldn't have achieved any of those things if I didn't have this set of tools. So where I'm coming from today is to share a bit more of what we're bringing to the STY community, what we've heard from your students, from your teachers, from your administrators, and what we've tried to channel into our Robin programming. We started Robin in 2020, partially in response to the pandemic, but also because we thought there was a moment in time that we may never have again to move the needle and shift our focus to what's really important. How do we start measuring what it means to connect? And that's really the root of Robin. I'm going to share a couple of things today before I turn it over to my colleague and my partner, my friend, Tara Karch. But let's take a look at some of the things that I think we can't forget as we try and understand how this context is really aligned to help your students succeed, not just in the classroom, but in life. As we think about where they're sitting, whether they're in 9th grade, in 10th grade, in 11th grade, if we put them in high school, I'm sure part of this conversation is what comes next. What does college look like? College is amazingly full of opportunities, but it's also a time of tremendous challenge. 24,000 college students attempt suicide every year. That's not just in some random place that you've never heard of. That's at Harvard. That's at Columbia. That's at all the places that you want to send your kids. How ready are they for those challenges? That's why this conversation is now happening in high school. If we take a look, high school seniors, 40% of high school seniors in 2017 thought that they felt lonely. That was in 2017. Put yourself in the last 2 years and imagine what that number is. We're seeing statistics 2/3, 75%, 90% of high school students are having struggles. That's why we're here. That's why we're having this conversation. But this doesn't just have to be a moment of crisis. This could be a moment of opportunity. When we take a look at where we can provide help, 82% of teens want to talk about mental health. They want to spark that conversation. And yet so many of them don't have a place to do so. That's where Robin comes in. The first presentation that I did for the students at STY, I led them through what we called finding your mantra. I wake up every day and I have to remind myself that the world is a challenging place and that I'm not going to win everything that I do. But I am more than willing to surrender to that reality and accept that there are lessons to be drawn when those challenges come up. There was a young lady sitting in the front row during my presentation, and I asked her what she was worried about. Keep in mind, this was a program for rising 9th graders. And she told me her biggest fear was that she was not going to get into Yale. What? You're starting 9th grade. You're already worried about whether or not you're going to get into Yale. So much of what we're hearing from our students is a mismatch of what their day-to-day experience is and the perspective that we as adults can have, sparking that conversation at a young age, not just what you want, but what you're scared of, not just what you've accomplished, but where you've struggled. That's where I think we do our most important work at Robin. When we gave a survey to the students at Stuyvesant High School, take a look at this graph. 95 responses. This is from a sample size, I think early on, maybe about 150 students. So it was pretty well representative of the group that we surveyed. The question was, I am comfortable with the amount of pressure I feel to excel. This is on a Likert scale from 1 to 7. 6 and 7 are, I'm very comfortable. That's 17%. That means 4/5 of the students that we were talking to did not feel comfortable or very comfortable with the amount of pressure they felt. That's something that shouldn't scare us, but it needs to put us and feel forewarned that there's a challenge out there. It needs to put us on watch for what's going on. To help those students get their arms wrapped around what it means to excel and how we can really take those challenges and turn them into triumphs, that's what we were doing with our Spark of Conversation. In those opening conversations, what we heard from our students was, I'm very scared I'm not going to measure up and I'm not going to be good enough. And what did I get to tell them? I got to tell them my story of getting into Harvard. And of course, everyone was like, yay, that's amazing. Congratulations. But I needed to remind them that the year I applied to school, 2/3 of the kids with perfect SAT scores were rejected. And I got in and I didn't have perfect SAT scores. I needed to remind them that I got into Harvard, but I got rejected at a whole bunch of other places that I really wanted to go. When we talk about the pressure to excel, it's often that we confuse this end goal of success with actually being satisfied and productive and of service in our lives. The success concept is not particularly well formed when we're younger. Wouldn't it be amazing if we started to have that conversation early enough to influence young people to find satisfaction and happiness and gratitude in their day-to-day? And what did I do? I shifted the conversation to my sophomore year of college, and I almost failed out of school. I almost failed out of school because I didn't know how to ask for help. I was struggling in my classes, and I was struggling with depression. I was struggling with a whole range of different things, and I was struggling on my own. Part of the reason that we partnered with Stuyvesant and part of the reason that Principal Singh reached out to us was, what I don't want is I don't want just a solution for one-on-one counseling. I want us to feel like we're a community, and that we're a community that can rely on one another, a community that can reach out when we're in trouble or when we need a helping hand or when we just need to say, hey, can you help? That's where Robin's group projects come in. We met with students in groups big and small so that students don't have to feel like they're the only one struggling, so that they can hear that by coming together and talking about moments of triumph and moments of tragedy, moments of loss and moments of victory, that we can together move to a better place. And because, like us, many of your students love data, probably like many of you, I'm just going to show you it works. A quarter of our students in just a 4-week time, on average, we saw a 25% improvement in connection across the board. Folks coming together to work with our coaches, to talk about real life experiences, real life challenges. What does it mean when you don't know how to make a friend? What does it mean when you don't know how to find balance in your life and all you're doing is homework? Coming together to share those conversations and develop real skills for coping, for stress management. That's why we saw increased connection, because it was also done together. What did we also find? The biggest gains came from folks who were starting off with the lowest initial scores. I'll tell you that at 16 years old, I didn't really know what mental health even meant. I don't even know if I would have had the vocabulary that your young people have to now ask to start this conversation. But I will tell you that, like me, many of them come into 9th grade unsure who to talk to and how to find the right language. And that's where, in our partnership with Stuy, I think we have seen the most powerful improvements for our young people. 83% of students said they were likely or very likely to use the skills that they've been taught. I think the way that we view our engagement here is to say to ourselves that we've got a whole huge range of stories like yours. We've got the challenges that your students have faced. We've got a whole bunch of moments where people have a huge stress at home because all they're also hearing is how everyone else is doing. The more that we can develop that self-awareness with our students, the more we can succeed not only in high school, not only in college, but let me just show you, this is where they're going to go as they think about their employment, as they think about their futures. So much of what we want to be able to do is begin to give students the larger picture. That's really what we're about. We live and breathe in data so that we can target what we're doing to exactly our audience. That's why for Stuyvesant students, and even for parents who've already raised hands, we know that stress and the performance anxiety to excel, that's real. We take that data to then frame specific conversations. Part of the reason my conversation was about overcoming failure was because I could point to a success that students could recognize and say, yes, I get it, but I can also show them it wasn't a straight line trajectory. And then as we bring those conversations together, we're teaching real skills. Why? Because those skills are just as applicable as they are in high school, as they are in college, as they are here in the workforce. I'm going to pause there, and I'd like to introduce Tara. I'd like to turn it over to her for a while. We're going to be here to not only share what we've been up to from our personal workshops and the programming that we've got in the spring and fall, but also to leave a clear opportunity for questions at the end. Before I turn it to Tara, I just want to share one more story. When I got on today, the folks that were waiting for me expressed their condolences because my mom passed away last week. That was really hard. But the question that came was, are you sure you're up for this? Are you sure that you want to be a part of this? Is this too much work? Do you need time? And I want to tell you the reason that I'm here, the reason that we're having this conversation is because of everything that she brought me up to believe is to be here for somebody else. The reason that Robin gets up every day is so that we can be your partners. Whatever we don't get to today, whatever questions we don't get to answer, I don't want you to ever think that this is transactional, that this is time limited. That line, it takes a village, it's not a cliche because everyone says it. It's a cliche because it's real. The reason that we do what we do, the reason I'm on here tonight is because this is the start of our work. In no way does this finish with tonight or this year or high school graduation. This is lifelong work that we're embarking on. Thank you so much. Looking forward to your questions. Tara, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Scott. I am going to practice my SEL skill of self-awareness and tell you that I am not good at multitasking. So until I have my slides up, and I believe I'm a little bit ahead here.
Actually, Tara, if I'll practice my SEL skill of being helpful, if you go to the top right where it says slideshow, it'll start right away. And then you don't have to go look for any of the views. Not the share, the slideshow.
Whoop, thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
my art. Let me scooch that over. Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
We're in this together, Tara.
We are. I do appreciate that. I want to underscore everything that Scott said. Thank you for sharing so beautifully. I am here tonight as Robin's SEL Client Services Manager. I'm also a Robin coach. In addition, I was an elementary school teacher for 14 years, and what drew me out of the classroom was actually my passion for social emotional learning. I became more and more concerned about my students' mental and emotional well-being as the years went on. And I noticed a number of things that really gravely concerned me when I was in the classroom. However, as I was sitting here and listening to Scott and thinking about all of you, it dawned on me, really my favorite job is being a parent. And when my younger son was a junior in high school, he had to fill out a form. I think it was in order to play sports, he had to fill out a physical form. And one of the questions was, how would you rate your level of anxiety or stress on a scale of 1 to 10? And he was at either an 8 or a 9. And I texted him just as we were beginning and asked if I could share a little bit about his story, just because when I saw him fill out that form, I had no idea that his level was that high. And that really alarmed me. And I told him, I said, this is not a level of stress you should be living with day to day. And there are things we need to do to take care of this. And we did, I'm happy to report, but I just felt that was a really powerful moment, kind of parent to parent, to share with you that there are so many tools that we can give our children, our students, to help them support themselves in emotional and mental wellness. Let's see. All right, Scott, I know you covered that and that. And I'm not sure if we covered the employers, but the skills that students pick up through social emotional learning are highly valuable skills that will serve them well beyond their high school years and well beyond their college years. And in fact, the definition of social emotional learning includes adults. These are not just skills for children or for students. These are lifelong skills that we're building. This was some research that showed that 3 out of 5 parents said that being happy or not overly stressed is more important than academics. And this is tying into what I shared about my experience in the classroom, where I saw students becoming more and more distracted and more anxious, and the emotional regulation, the levels of emotional regulation I saw in my students over the course of years was going down. And I saw these things and they concerned me. And again, that is really actually what drew me out of the classroom and into Robin. Very grateful that I have landed here. As we previously referenced, 82% of teens want to speak more honestly and openly about mental health. 82%. 92% of surveyed executives say that these skills, such as problem solving and communicating clearly, are equally or more important than technical skills. So hearing from the students, there is a desire. Hearing from employers, where the students will go after high school, after college, there is a need. So we are wondering, we would love to hear from you as parents. What are your thoughts about the importance of providing students with social emotional learning programs? And this is where we are planning to have that poll run, if we could, please. Perfect. So we have 3 choices: not so important, important, very important.
Everyone should be able to see it on their screen now.
Perfect, thank you.
So fun to see it happening in real time.
It is. It looks like a pretty steady, not quite double, but between important and very important. Oh, the gap is narrowing just a little bit there, but yes, so the majority would rate it as very important. And we do not have any participants who are rating it as not so important. Thank you. We really appreciate your participation there, so we can just kind of get a sense of where you are. And if I go ahead and share those. And we'll get rid of that. All right, so what is social emotional learning? Again, this is social emotional learning. These are skills for students and adults, and it all starts with the self. Through social emotional learning, we develop a strong sense of self. As we build our strong sense of self, we are then able to regulate ourselves emotionally. We can manage ourselves. Through that, we're able to make responsible decisions. We're able to make healthy choices that support us in our relationships with others, and we're then able to connect and to live out our sense of purpose through these connections with others and through these relationships that we're able to develop. So these are, again, lifelong, really important skills. The benefits of social emotional learning, well researched. We have behavioral benefits, we have academic benefits, but really, I think that bottom benefit, improve lifetime outcome. That is huge, obviously, to have an improved lifetime outcome. We're not just helping these students to get through high school or to get into college or even to succeed in college, but to, and really not even to succeed beyond college, but to live fulfilling, healthy, joyful lives. I mean, you know, as a parent, I know there's nothing I want more than that for my own children. And as a teacher, there was really nothing I wanted more than that for my students.
Sarah, I'd love to pick up on that for just 1 second, if you don't mind. Can we go back to that slide just for a second?
Absolutely.
You know, I'm struck by the poll, and about 1/3 of folks said not so important. About 2/3 said important or very important. And part of the reason that we asked that question is that I was kind of curious to think, or to start to figure out, what do people really think we mean when we talk about social emotional learning? If we had asked that question differently, Like, would you like your students to be more academically successful? I'm sure 100% of you would say yes. If I were to ask, would you like your students to be more successful in their careers, in their marriages, and live longer lives? I'm sure you would say yes. That last point about lifetime outcomes, I don't want to lose this in the mix, but actually the key to longevity, the longest running study that Harvard has for happiness and length of life, is tied to connection to other folks. It's not tied to your income. You'd be the richest person on the planet. So I want to also make sure that as we think about what Tara's about to share, the skills that we talk about when we talk about SEL, for those of you who don't think of it as important, everyone is entitled to their opinion. I'm not here to just change your mind, but look at it through a slightly different lens. Not whether or not you think SEL and that term is important, but whether or not the outcomes that it enables and whether or not the successes that you want for your children can happen to the level you want them to happen without them being well grounded and well adjusted. Because I think when we flip the lens and we move SEL as the thing that drives success, we are all a lot more satisfied and happy seeing it ingrained inside of the school, not to supplant math, not to replace English class, but in order to help you succeed overall in all of those classes. Sorry, Tara, back over to you. I just was struck by how interesting it is to see those slides back to back.
Thank you so much, Scott. Yes, I think that is a brilliant point. And I do want to underscore that research about the importance of connection. I myself only learned about that when I became a health and well-being coach, and I was floored by that myself. So Robin's approach to social emotional learning is different. As Scott said, it is all tied to connection, human connection, having those live conversations through live coaching. We have videos with our coaches, and we help students, we enable students to overcome real world challenges by helping them build up real life skills. And if you take a look at this slide here, you can see we've highlighted a few of the challenges that we help students to tackle. And these are a few that your students have been supported through our previous coaching. We had stress and test anxiety, self-empowerment, emotional regulation, keeping your cool. We called it resilience, social media use, and thought traps, which dealt with the importance of positive thinking, not in terms of toxic positivity, but more in the sense of avoiding catastrophic thinking, where we come across a situation and it's, the end of the world, putting things into perspective. And as we move into the spring, we have some great coaches coming up as well. If we take a look at the 9th grade student empowerment program, this is that 4 weeks of coaching and related curriculum that the 9th graders went through. We can highlight a few things here really to show the power of the practices that they were encountering through this experience. They had 4 weeks of coaching. They had a related curriculum. We have an online platform with curriculum that we tie into the coaching. In addition, the students had a gamified challenge. And during that gamified challenge, they were practicing skills that, again, can support them lifelong in developing these really healthy habits. There were 622 instances of gratitude being expressed during this challenge. There were 1,394 reflections, students reflecting, and there were 1,752 peer shout outs. So again, these things that students were doing, and it felt really fun and like it was a game, they were actually building these really, really important habits: gratitude, reflecting, and connection with their peers through these shout outs where they could compliment each other. So that was a really powerful experience. And as Scott pointed out earlier, there was a 25% increase in the connectedness scores, which was significant.
And Tara, if I might pick up on one thing there, part of the reason that when we talk about having conversations with coaches and then having this practice inside the gamified challenge, there's a Chinese proverb that I really love: tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me, and I'll understand. And I think what we wanted to be able to stress here is that it's one thing to have coaching, it's one thing to have conversations, but Tara hit on something really important. It's about the practice. If we're not spending our time doing, we're not going to feel the benefits in the same way. And the reason there were 600 moments of gratitude or 4,000 interactions in 4 weeks is because the students started to feel that benefit of being directly engaged. One of the key elements that Robin really believes in is while there isn't one size fits all for SEL, if you ignore that phrase, we do know there are certain elements of our human psyche that can be triggered to become better. One is connecting with others. 2 is hearing and sharing stories like yours. 3 is going to be actually that daily practice that builds the habit. For anybody listening that's ever gone to the gym and tried to get started, you don't go every day, it doesn't become a habit. Vegetables, yeah, I don't know how on earth I started, but if I didn't eat them all the time, I know that I would not still be eating them as an adult. So a lot of this is about making sure they're directly involved as opposed to just passive consumers of what we're trying to share.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Really beautiful, important point. Students also shared about their coaching experience, that they were given a lot of good ideas to help them manage their anxiety. That was one student in particular. The ideas that were shared through coaching were simple, they were easy to implement, they were relatable, and they helped students to de-stress. So again, little bits that can be put into a daily practice. Coming up, we have some really fabulous coaches and workshops that we're very excited about at Robin. We have Dr. Colleen Jacobson, who will be sharing about mindful decision-making. Newer coach, Rachel Handler, she is amazing. She'll be coming to talk to the students about confident conversations. Our fabulous Naisha Williams, Connecting for Success is her. And then our own Scott Farber, Managing Anxiety. Yes, we have another new coach as well, a little spoiler alert, and she will be coming to speak to the students about time management and that it is actually emotional management, which I found rather brilliant. So what can you do at home? Just as you would want to help your students with, their academic skills at home, you would want to be reinforcing that at home. It's really important to be able to reinforce these social emotional learning skills at home. And since these are skills that adults are constantly building ourselves, it's really kind of easy to build this in at home. It's very important. I remember speaking to one of our newer coaches about resiliency, and she was saying how it's so important for parents to model resiliency and to show, as Scott said, mistakes are lessons. There is a purpose. I always said this in my classroom, there's a purpose for making mistakes so that we can go back and learn from them. So when we make mistakes as adults, it's important for our children and our students to see how we react to them. And if I am afraid of failure as an adult, if I just kind of quit at the first mistake I make as an adult, then my children are going to see that and they're going to take away from that. So if I model resiliency, if I model that, okay, maybe it didn't work out the first time, but maybe it's actually going to work out better the second time because of what I learned from the first attempt. That's a really powerful lesson for students. Spending time with friends, making sure that you're nurturing your own social connections, embracing your mistakes, employing mindful practices. A lot of benefits about mindfulness as well, helping to manage with anxiety. And I know it's just really, in my own personal experience, it's really just helped me have a much more joyful experience of life. So we do encourage mindfulness, practicing gratitude, providing space for conversation. Again, when my son filled out that form with rating himself as an 8 in terms of anxiety, he was in his junior year of high school. He was thinking about what colleges to apply to. He was taking 5 AP courses, despite my warning him that I felt like that was too much. He stopped playing water polo, which was something he had really enjoyed, but he just felt like he didn't have anything to give to it anymore. These are all things I wish I had seen and wish I had had these conversations with him about. So it's so important to be, constantly talking to your students about just about what's going on in their lives, how they're feeling, asking follow-up questions, asking clarifying questions, and then really encouraging our students and our children to be engaging in extracurricular activities that aren't academically related, helping them find and develop their passions and just having fun and enjoying connections with others through that. Well, I know I can speak for Scott on this, that we are so grateful. Speaking of practicing gratitude, we are so grateful to be here with all of you tonight. And we would love to hear what questions you have for us.
And as we pivot into questions, one thing I'd like us all to keep in mind is that when we think about things like coaching, some folks that are listening might be wondering, is this right for my kid? My kid's a high achiever. My kid's a low achiever. My kid doesn't have friends. My kid has a lot of friends. Coaching is good for everyone. One of our leading coaches and co-founders, George Mumford, is Michael Jordan's meditation and mindful guru. He's Michael Jordan, and he's got a coach. The CEOs of Google, all the folks that are at the peak of their game recognize they don't have all the answers. So ask whatever questions you like. Don't worry about whether or not it may or may not apply to you. It probably applies to you and probably at least one or two other people in the audience.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, both Scott and Tara. We had a few questions that came in through the Q&A, so Mimi and I will go back and forth and ask some of them. The first question has a little bit to do with some STY-specific information, but it ends in a very general question that perhaps you can contribute on. So we do have an overwhelming amount of stress at home because STY's 90% average is not good enough to get placed in AP classes and electives, while some other selective schools have easy access to these courses. But how would you recommend that this stress be managed?
It's a great question. I'll jump in with a couple of thoughts. Tara, definitely want to hear what your thoughts are as well. I mentioned early on that my first company, A-List Education, focused on the college access side of things. And so we were working with students from Stuy, from Horace Mann, from hundreds of New York City schools, but also from around the world. They could be from Dubai or they could be from London. So this sort of a question would come up quite a bit because many of the students that we talked to were on a path towards what they considered to be elite success after high school. And so how do I get into all the hardest courses? How do I compete at all of the highest levels? First of all, I would say, let's start with kind of focusing on a slightly bigger picture where possible. If what we're lost in is the weeds of how to get into the AP class, we might be missing the forest for the trees. So if what we're looking for instance, is the most competitive coursework that a student might be able to have access to, AP classes aren't the only option. The rise of programs like Coursera and online education allows students to pursue studies whether they're inside the school day in an AP class or in a variety of other capacities too. It's also conceivable that a student can demonstrate academic excellence without having to be in 7 AP courses. Tara, I'm thinking about your son. We work with a lot of elite universities, and APs in and of themselves are not the guaranteed arbiter of the strongest academic performance. So there are other ways to show an academic interest and an academic skill set than just the AP course. So if we pull back and ask ourselves, what are we trying to demonstrate? It might be that it can be achieved in a different way. We've only just been familiar with the one pathway. And so I might say to start off, let's begin with a focus on the objective, being a bit broader than the AP class itself, to see if there are other levers to pull. And when it comes to the anxiety, let's, to the best that we can, align ourselves with that end goal so that a failure doesn't feel, I didn't make the AP bio class because I didn't have the 90%. If I want to be a doctor, that is not decided by whether or not I get into AP bio. So let's try and realign some of our goals with different pathways to achieve the end result so that we're not caught up with every individual moment we don't get exactly what we want.
Scott, I love that. Absolutely, that alignment. That's beautiful. My perspective would be coming down to kind of a more micro level and the daily practices. I just celebrated 3 years of daily practicing gratitude. I think a gratitude journal is so helpful. I think that meditation, mindfulness, breathing techniques, they're so helpful in helping to manage anxiety. So if we put those supports into place, I think that they can really go a long way toward helping students deal with stressors.
And actually, if I could tie those 2 points together, both on the micro tactical level and that larger kind of philosophical level, if I just decide to make it hypothetically, I want to be a doctor. I'm just going to stick with that kind of like little ecosystem for a moment. And I think about all the ways to become a doctor. And I'm journaling about all the gratitude that I have, or I'm identifying all the different ways that I get to engage my intellectual side. That might actually be better served while also getting an internship at a hospital. That might also be better served by getting a clinical research opportunity with a professor. So there might be other ways to go achieve that goal where writing those things out and aligning yourself to a plan where each day you can take one more step. Was it Lao Tzu? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You don't just arrive at Dr. So-and-so. So maybe it's about looking at that goal and beginning to become a little bit more grateful for each step we take towards it.
Thank you both for those really thoughtful responses. We have a few more, so I'm going to read the next question. From another parent, how do you engage the child who thinks that they may know better and not take advantage of Robin and other mental health forums?
Let me start by saying, at least in my mind, just about every teenager I've ever met always knows better. So you're not alone. This is something that I think we all just face at a certain point in our lives. So I would start by recognizing that part of that is probably an element of defensiveness. It is a lot easier to push everyone else away and just decide you are right because you don't want to be vulnerable. It was really hard for me to surrender my own ego and recognize that I didn't know everything. So how did I get to that place? Well, the superintendent of schools and I, when I was in high school, became very good friends. And one of the things that he did was introduce me to a people that were a lot smarter than me. It was so humbling so quickly. I thought that I knew everything about history until I met the assistant superintendent who was a Russian history major. I thought I knew everything about politics until I sat down with the chief of staff from our local representative. And so part of what happened, ignoring Robin, ignoring programs, we know there are people out there that are smarter than your student. I don't know who they are, but I'm guaranteeing you that there are people out there that know more. And because you're the parent, you can't possibly be right. That's just the dynamic that exists. So let's try and come up with different dynamics that connect your student to somebody else who can be a different example without you having to create the friction of saying, no, I know better. Because the more you say that, the less your student's going to listen. So put that on to someone else, and in the process, allow your student to start to feel a little less certain. It's pretty easy to sit in the house and say mom or dad doesn't know anything. It's kind of hard to sit across from a professor who happens to be at the top of his or her field. So it might just be exposing that young person to the greater world out there. And STUY's got its own echo chamber effect. Let's be honest. These are folks who think they're all really, really smart. And many of them are really, really smart. But they're not the only people on the planet. There are 30,000 high schools out there. When I meet presidents of student government and they tell me how great they are, that they're presidents of student government, I say, you're one of 30,000. And there are 30,000 editors-in-chief of the newspaper. There are 300,000 varsity captains that will be applying to college this coming year. We are not quite as unique as we think we are, but we can really benefit from learning from the others that are on that level or above. So I would go the route of introducing more ideas and more people and have it be outside of just your direct experience.
I think that is an excellent route. I would agree that telling a teenager to do something is certainly not the effective choice to make. I could also recommend holding space. So rather than telling your student what to do, if you employ active listening and you mirror back what your student is saying to you. So if my student tells me, but I don't want to use Robin, then I don't come back at that child and say, you really need to do this. Instead, I say, I hear that you're really struggling. And I hear that you you're a little resistant maybe to using Robin or to using whatever, I'm curious, can you tell me more about that? And as you just kind of tease out more and more information from the student and just again, hold that space, allow them to work through the process of solving their own problems, bounce ideas back and forth, they often will come up with their own solution, and they may end up right where you want them to go without your having directed them there. And it's a really empowering experience for them as well.
Thank you both. That's excellent responses on both of you. The next question is, how can we support our teenage children? Oh, they move every time somebody asks a question on the screen. How can we support our teenage children to gain self-control if using electronic devices when they're constantly exposed to social media and computer games?
Tara, do you want to take this one first? I realize I got so excited about the other ones. I want to make sure that I hold space also for you. Do you want this one first?
Thank you. If you are ready to go, Scott, I will hand it to you. I am noodling this one. This is a tough one.
So as per usual, I probably have a lot to say about just about everything. And thanks, Mom. I appreciate that. One of the things that I am constantly astounded by is the idea that students have no control over this. And we hear it from them directly. And they say things like, I just can't help myself. If you step back into the psychology of addiction, you can't just take it away. So one of the biggest issues that folks, and let's just go back to the addiction space, for instance, when people to give up the many bad vices they might have, they're often left with an emptiness. I had a problem, I had a solution, you took away my solution, I still have my problem. So at the core of overuse or misuse of social media is something else. They weren't born with a desire to get on Facebook. I know as hard as that is to believe that, well, not that they use Facebook anymore, but they weren't born with this. So there has to be something else that we can find in their lives to replace some of how they're spending that time. Now, that might mean something like between the hours of 5 and 8, there is no social media, and we're going to sit as a family and we're going to talk and have dinner together. That might be between the hours of 9 and 11, you're going to do homework in electronic devices or somewhere else. But what we have to do is we have to find a different way to engage this as opposed to just taking it away or pointing at it and saying, this is bad, stop. Because the history of the human brain is that that doesn't work. So we're going to have to find some other productive opportunities for students to engage in things that involve social media or their replacement. And if they are going to be on social media, and this is something that I worked with a bunch of my students, again, I mentioned A-List before, but focus on the college access side. The deals that we would make between kids and parents was, how do we turn this into a force for good? So you are allowed to be on your social media channels, but you also needed to maintain a presence in the social media channels that were focused on service, or were focused on a nonprofit, or were focused on promoting a different type of message. And that meant social media could take on something different than just the FOMO of looking at my friend on a yacht, or wondering why that person has all the stuff that I want and I don't have it today. So social media now had a different use than simply for my friends or for my own well-being. It's also possible that if you really want to push this, that a deeper dive into the statistics that came out of Instagram and Facebook that highlighted the addiction of this kind of use and the negative impacts are things that other people haven't even looked at. Now, also, just as we think about this through our own lens, Robin has internal expertise in this, and we've provided coaches to be able to work with young people on this. And that might be something for some that requires a bit more time than for others. Because again, there's no one size fits all here. But I think that the more that we look at social media as a tool that could be used differently, or as an activity that could be replaced with something else, as opposed to an evil that's corrupting our kids that they need to stop using, the more constructive our engagement with our young people will be.
I have just a very short ad, and that would be modeling, just making sure that as parents, we're not on social media, on our phones, when we're asking our children not to be.
Great, thank you. Our next question, how can we encourage our teens to feel comfortable to talk to their counselor or parent about their pressure? They may feel bad to let others know their pressure and weaknesses.
I think that this is, I think that this is where Robin's approach is really so powerful in that we spark these conversations. When my son went to visit a college for the first time, I think it was an overnight visit, he came back and he said, "Mom, it was amazing because we were all sitting around talking about how stressed out we are. And I realized how many other people are struggling with this too." And these were conversations he didn't have in college. I'm sorry, in high school. So it was a unique experience for him there. These are discussions that we not only do we spark with Robin, but we have a very qualified space holder. We have a very qualified coach so that students can feel like they're in a safe space to share, and our coaches know exactly what to do with the emotions that arise and the issues that come up during conversations like this.
And building on that, Tara, I think one of the things, and I used this phrase before, stories like yours, one of the things that I think that young folks need to hear, because I definitely didn't hear this growing up, is that it is okay to not feel good. I just had a conversation with my father 2 weeks ago. I was down in Florida, and he's had a very challenging life. He told me that he's always happy. And I looked at him and I was like, "You've got to be nuts. There is no way that you go through life every day happy." He said, "Well," and the more that we talked, the more what he was looking for from me as his son was just a bit of validation to hear that it was okay that he wasn't always happy. And he needed that from me. Man, 77 years old. He doesn't need me to tell that, but apparently he does. So I think that as a parent, the more, not that you need to show up every day and say, "Tell me what's wrong, tell me what's wrong, tell me what's wrong," because that's not going to work. But the more the challenges that we face, we don't keep inside, and that we hold space to be able to highlight that you're not alone, I think the better this is going to be. I'd also like just to highlight the difference between the leadership at Stuyvesant High School versus so many high schools around the country. When we got on our first call, that first call wasn't just with Principal Singh, wasn't just with some of the administration, just wasn't with Mimi. It was with students. It was with teachers. Stuyvesant High School has embraced the concept that this community cares. And that's not going to change overnight to include everyone. But there are folks in this school that are pushing this conversation front and center so that students recognize that there are resources that they don't have to hold up their hand in front of everyone, but they can avail themselves of in a different way. They are also highlighting that it isn't just one place to go, or one teacher to ask, or one counselor to go find during your free period, but that we're all here to provide that kind of wraparound support that I think we're looking for. It also destigmatizes the conversation to know that other people hear you, other people are having, and other people understand where you're coming from. So I think to the extent that we can all continue to commit ourselves to continue down this path, to continue to push this conversation into a place that students can feel comfortable having it, the more we're going to see better and better responses from our young people. Really, the way that I look at it is that you all are on the front line of a revolution. This conversation of teaching the whole child, it's been in education for decades. We just haven't done it. We've said we were going to do it. We just didn't follow through. And actually, the people that are going to hold us to account, it's the kids, because they're telling us they need this conversation and they need it yesterday. So I think if you can continue to reassure them that it's okay to ask for help and that you don't have to be the one source of comfort or truth as a parent, but that you are there if they want to have it, the more comfortable they're going to be finding the right person at the right time. And it might be you. It may not be you first, but it might be you second. So I think let's just continue to commit ourselves to keeping the space for that conversation because they want to have it.
Thanks, Scott. A lot of our parents, our families out there are asking when these sessions take place. So I'll just take a minute to let them know that so far during the fall term, Robin has visited us almost on a weekly basis and held these sessions after school, after 10th period in the theater. So we've made announcements, and that's where, although they were highlighted for our freshmen, all of our student body was invited to attend these sessions. And there will be more of them in the spring term. We should have a schedule up soon. And there will be one on March 10th with our juniors, especially for them. So at 3:45, they'll be invited into the theater. So we have a lot of families wondering when these sessions take place. And that leads into a good question that was asked about someone not understanding exactly how children connect with Robin. And if there are children going through something, can they contact you, or can parents contact you? And maybe you can just answer that briefly.
Before I answer that, I just want to say one thing just about the timing and the fact that we put it after school. One of the things, there's no right time to meet with students. What we wanted to also do was respect the culture at Stuyvesant High School that puts academics at the heart of the day. We didn't show up and say, the only way this works is if you give us fourth period and you cancel what you're doing. So also, even as we try to engage, we're trying to engage through a lens that respects where this time is normally spent, where kids are expecting to be meeting, and to do that at the 3:45 time when they don't have to also think about their academics was to give them a space to just take a deep breath and be able to step into a different type of conversation. So it was thoughtfully planned at 3:45 because the administration front and center was saying, where are we going to get the best engagement with our young people? And so it was a really thoughtful presentation on the part of Stuyvesant High School. So just want to put Sty there front and center and give kudos where they are due. In terms of how folks can connect with us, we're there for those sessions, but I don't want to confuse what's happening and say that we're leading group therapy. We are not. We are not showing up as licensed psychologists or psychiatrists to meet with your students one-on-one. We are not taking this into the clinical land. What we are is a starting point for this conversation. We keep coming back to sparking that conversation. We would welcome a conversation with a parent who says, hey, here's a question that I have about my young person, but we're not going to offer you professional advice about whether or not your student should be tested for being perhaps suffering from anxiety. That's kind of not our goal. But we do want students to come to us. We do want to be able to direct them to the right school resources. We work very, very closely with the administration to make sure that we've got the supports in place as students raise their hand and ask for help. But I would encourage the more communication, the better. We don't know what we don't know. And so if there is some way for us to be able to be your partner in that conversation, we'll figure it out together.
Thank you so much. I know I was just chatting with Linda, firming up our dates for the spring. So I'd love to share those with everyone. We're looking at March 25th, April 1st, 8th, and 25th. So those are 4 days, and we were really strategic in planning these sessions. They're open to all students. They're after 10th period in the theater. And we'll have plenty of flyers and messaging. I know Miss Ingram puts them in her weekly update. She puts them on social media. The student union sends them to remind students to come. And we really encourage students to bring a friend, to make it something social, something sort of fun and relaxing to do together. So we've really been working on that with just, getting the word out, getting students excited to come. In each session, we see more and more students coming. And like for Linda, I remember we were celebrating. So we had one day where, like, when we kept breaking 50, we broke 55, and we just kept going up, up, up. But again, those dates are March 25th, April 1st, 8th, and 25th. And we also do our best to make sure that, it doesn't conflict with other big events that are going on at Stuyvesant at the same time. So we try. We know there's other things, kids have other commitments, but we have been really thoughtful in trying to pick those dates and, so that kids can come and focus on, take some time for themselves.
Ms. Prabhu gives gift cards as a raffle at the end.
Let's be honest, we're not above bribery. It is very, very important. And if it gets folks to get butts in seats, that's a win.
I do have one final question. Maybe you can talk a little about yourselves some more. Our parents were wondering about your background and training that the coaches have. So maybe you can tell them a little bit about your coaches and their training and their backgrounds.
Tara, as our head coach, do you want to kick it off?
Sure, I'd love to, Scott. Our coaches come from an amazing and wide array of backgrounds. We have everything from mental health counselors, college and career counselors, authors, educators. We have such a diverse background in terms of our coaches so that they're able to speak from a number of different perspectives and areas of expertise. In terms of training, we provide them with a manual. We have some training sessions that are actually in the works now with trauma-informed practices and public speaking and kind of going through our presentations. I also personally meet with each coach before the workshop to run through it and to see if there are any kind of areas we might want to tweak or think about where there might be an issue so that we can kind of troubleshoot it proactively. And I just do want to say one more thing, Scott. Sorry, I don't want to go on and on, but our coaches, the thing that really strikes me the most is that they are so passionate about helping students. And that is the common thread.
And the one thing that I'd also highlight, and Tara hit the nail on the head, they're coming from amazing backgrounds. They're incredibly accomplished in their own professional lives. They're trained by us. They are exposed to a whole range of trauma-informed care, Sandy Hook Promise, talking about suicidal ideation, lots of stuff that might go into that professional development. But they also come with very specific topics and very specific subjects that might be near and dear to their heart. Like, so the managing anxiety that I'll talk about, I've spent about 10,000 hours in the classroom working on the SAT and the ACT and the college access portion of things. I've also helped hundreds of thousands of students. So when I speak about managing anxiety and I tell a story about sitting next to Dean Fitzsimmons, it comes from an area of real lived experience. When I think of Dr. John Averett, he was a high school basketball coach, a high school counselor. Now he's a master resilience trainer at Fort Hood for the US Army. So when he speaks about resilience, he takes the students to what it would have been like at 16 missing a three-point shot to dodging bullets in Baghdad. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring these different lived experiences underneath this umbrella where this isn't mental health therapy. This isn't just a discussion of, are you unhappy? This is, how do we develop real solid skill sets around real high school issues so that we can equip you to not only handle this when it comes up in your own life, but to extrapolate those skills for well beyond the time that we get to spend with you in grades 9 through 12.
Thank you both so much. Again, I'm going to turn it over to Principal Yu for some concluding comments this evening, and thank everyone for attending.
Good. Thanks, Dina. Again, families, thank you very much for attending tonight. I want to give a big shout out to Scott, Tara, and Linda for all the great work that you all have done, not only tonight, but throughout the time in our partnership. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of learning on your part, takes a lot of learning on our part, and I've been really happy with the partnership. There is no magic pill. There is no right answer. We're constantly learning and figuring out how we continue to build community, continuing to find ways in which young people can connect with one another, with the adults in the building, adults outside of our building. Again, it's going to take a concerted effort. It's going to take a collective effort, and it's going to take patience and time. I really do appreciate all the work that Robin has done. I greatly appreciate the work that Ms. Prabhu, Ms. Ingram, Ms. Pedrick, and all our staff, and really trying to think about the ways that we're building these resiliency skills, these ways for young people to connect to one another, to their families, to our adults, and then to themselves as well. It is tremendously difficult to be a teenager and a young person in this day and age. I think it speaks volumes about the young people that we have at our school and the work that they've done, produced, and what they will continue to do. They've been extraordinary during the perhaps some of the most difficult of times, and again, they continue to be as successful as they can be. But they're young adults, and they're still developing and learning and maturing. So we've got a lot of work to do in supporting them. And I also just want to say, to our families and parents, it is not easy to be a parent in this day and age as well. And so I love what Scott and Tara and had to say about this. We do model to our young people every single day the skills that we want them to showcase. We ourselves have to demonstrate. And I know for a fact that it's not easy. Came home tonight and trying to be the best dad. And sometimes I'm not the best dad, and my patience and my resiliency can falter. But tonight really gave me a lift in recognizing like it's okay to make mistakes. I have that conversation with my daughters and say, listen, I'm an adult, you know, and I make mistakes all the time, but I'm going to learn from it. So I hope all of you took a lot from tonight. Again, you know, our sessions with Robin, again, are open to our students. We'll continue to remind them to attend and take advantage of these opportunities. The partnership is really important. And again, we want to continue to encourage young people. There are a number of resources available to them. You have to take advantage of it when you can. And some of it will include some encouraging and maybe even some bribing. But we do want them to make sure that they know that this is available on all levels. And ultimately, we want them to build community so they feel a sense of belonging at Stuyvesant High School so that they can be productive young people when they're in our school and then when they leave us. So again, thank you, everyone. Really, it was a great presentation. We're looking forward to continuing the conversations and finding ways that to connect with our young people and have them stay connected with us. So thanks, everyone.
Take care and good night.